Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a woman working at a diner is visited by a stranger with a dark secret. So, where are you from? Because Samuel came from a strange place.
Back in 2016, I was working at a roadside diner west of St. Cloud, Minnesota. Neat little place, had a bit of a 60s vibe to it, but without the hairdo. On the slow hours of the day, or whenever we just had locals around, I'd be humming along with the chefs playing radio out of the kitchen. It wasn't an exciting time, but it was nice to have a workplace that felt like a second home. A couple of weekends a month, we had an all-night crew to serve passing truckers. You usually never had to do more than one shift, though, and we got to make own schedules. Our boss was pretty hands-off. It was during one of those shifts at the first week of early summer that my life took a turn for the worse, and I didn't even realize it. We were used to having the occasional odd customer during those hours of the day. When this guy walked in, I didn't know what to think. He was about 6'2", bald and pale as chalk. He wore this worn-out t-shirt that looked like it had been on fire. With every step, he dragged his feet and collapsed in one of our booths, seemingly exhausted. I looked back at the chef, and he just shrugged. Guy wasn't hurting anyone, but he didn't look like he was all there. But a job's a job, so I went up to him. "You all right there?" I asked. He looked up at me like I was speaking a foreign language, then sunk his head back down, gently shaking it.
Nah,
he said.
I don't think I am.
He had this voice on the knife's edge between a hysterical laugh and a howling cry. He was trembling. "You need me to call someone?"
Call?
"Yeah, call someone."
How?
I didn't understand the question. I figured he was coming down from some kind of binge, and I wasn't about to take any chances. I asked the chef to get me a side of bacon to keep the guy calm while I called the police. As I slid the plate over to him, he sunk his face into his hands, sobbing.
Thank you.
He cried.
Please.
I sat down across from him, instinctively reaching out to grab his hand. He let me. Even at a light touch, I could feel the scars on his palm and fingertips. Whatever had happened to him, it must have been awful.
I can't go back.
He sniffled.
Don't make me go back. I can't. Please, I can't.
"You're not going anywhere. It's okay." I smiled. "You're safe here."
Can you help me?
He asked.
Can you keep him out?
"I'm sure we can figure it out." I nodded. "Just eat up. It's okay." His fingers trembled as he tentatively bit off a piece of bacon. His teeth were black and he flinched.
I need time.
He said.
I need time to run.
"Don't worry," I assured him. "We've called for help."
I just need time.
We just sat there for a while. He calmed his breathing but kept staring out the window. I could tell he was looking for something, or someone. All I could see was a road and a handful of moths. We sat there for some time in silence as he carefully nibbled on the slices of maple bacon. As two police officers entered the diner, he got up from his seat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bundle of scrunched up trash. A couple of singles, a plastic card, dirt, and something resembling animal bones. He tried to straighten out the bills, pushing them into my hands along with the laminated card.
I need time. I'll come back. Please.
I didn't understand. I just nodded and accepted it. Seconds later, the officers asked him to step outside and explain the situation. I got busy taking orders from a couple of passing truckers, watching glimpses of the scene through the window. A couple of minutes later, the strange man was taken away. My shift ended at sunrise. I dragged myself to my car with a yawn, shuffling around my pockets for the keys. I hadn't thought much about the items he'd handed me, but I took a closer look. I'd thrown away the animal bones and dirt, but there were a couple of dollar bills and that laminated card left. I checked the card first. It looked like some kind of bookmark. On one side, it was completely white, and on the other side, there were dried blue flower petals arranged in a spiral. Kind of reminded me of a sunflower. And finally, there were the dollar bills. I didn't pay much attention to these at first. Just a couple of singles. But after a closer look, I noticed something unusual. There was a man on the bill that I didn't recognize. It took me a couple of Google searches to realize that this man was Walter Mondale, the man who'd lost to Ronald Reagan's second run for president back in '84. Why was this man on a $1 bill? Before heading to bed, I put the items down on my nightstand. In a moment of silent wonder, I looked out the window. What had that man been looking for? What had he been running from? There was nothing out there, just a couple of moths. Waking up the next morning, I had a full day off. I spent it cleaning my apartment, watching movies, having dinner with a couple of friends, and ending the night with a couple of drinks at the pub down on the corner. No binge or anything, just got a bit boozy. I was still gonna be in bed by midnight. I took the scenic route home. A long walk. All the way down Main Street, past the lake. I took a shortcut through the park by the final stretch, speeding up a bit. That place was trouble. As I hurried by the fountain, I spotted someone in the distance, a shrouded figure at the edge of the streetlights. I stopped to observe for a second, but as I did, the lights flickered. Coming back on, the figure was gone. I chalked it up to imagination. I was a bit drunk after all. Besides, it was small, like a child. What the hell would a kid be doing out at this hour? A couple of days passed. I didn't notice anything unusual, but I kept coming back to that distressing feeling of missing something important. Looking back at it now, I just feel dumb. He was there all along. Outside the supermarket, in the parking lot, off the highway. Hell, he was outside my window at night sometimes, but just too short for me to spot. I'm getting ahead of myself. It wasn't until one morning when I was driving to work that I got a clear view of him. I was crossing a four-way street, taking a sharp left turn, when I had to throw myself on the brakes. There was a kid in the middle of the street. I hadn't seen him that clearly before. He was probably around 6, maybe 7 years old. Wearing a plain black shirt and a pair of light blue canvas pants. Short black hair, dark eyes, and no shoes. That particular detail stuck with me. No shoes? Why? I almost lost control, but I was lucky. There wasn't much traffic, and I managed to stop further down the road. There were black lines in the pavement from my screeching tires swerving back and forth. Regaining my composure, I looked in the rearview mirror. The kid was gone. But that was just the start. I'd spot him every now and then. Looking out the window at work, at the gas station. A passing face in the crowd when shopping for groceries. Every now and then, something would pull on my attention, forcing me to whip my head around, looking for the source of that ill feeling crawling up my spine. Sometimes I saw him. And even worse, sometimes I didn't. I remember lying awake at night, hearing moths tap against my window. There was nothing else. Nothing outside. I patrolled my apartment 6 times, checking every window. I'd looked everywhere, and there was no reason for me to feel the way I did. I was growing paranoid. And yet, in the morning, my front door was unlocked, and slightly open. It all came to a head one afternoon when I was out on my smoke break. I'd barely slept for the past 3 nights, and you could kind of tell I was having a bad day. As I stood there, leaning against the side door of the diner, I see the kid again. This time just across the road, maybe 50 feet or so away. I'd had enough. This had to end. I was furious. I stormed forward, calling him out with every slur and curse I could think of. I was psyching myself up. I was in the right, and I refused to be harassed anymore, kid or not. Didn't matter. I crossed the road, barely dodging a speeding Jeep, and met him face to face. "What the hell do you want?" I'd yell. "Why are you following me?" He was completely expressionless. He didn't even flinch, no matter how much I pointed or screamed. I snapped my fingers in front of his eyes, and he didn't even blink. He just stared at me, like a porcelain doll head on a swivel. I wasn't thinking about the bystanders, though. A couple of middle-aged men stepped up, asking in no kind terms what the hell was wrong with me. I was held back and restrained. Someone called the police. Someone else called my manager. I'd forgotten to take off my apron so they could see the diner logo. A couple of people filmed it. One of the videos got like 120,000 views in a day before it fell off the map. I still see it as a react gif sometimes. It was a disaster. After a couple of officers came by to talk to me, he'd just disappeared into thin air. The officers took me down to the station. Not to detain me, but to get me away from the heated crowd. That car ride downtown sobered me up to what the hell was going on. I was being stalked by this kid, but there wasn't a living soul out there that would believe me. Well, maybe one. Maybe. I was asked a couple of questions and released within about half an hour. They told me to go home and sleep this whole thing off. That wouldn't be a problem. I didn't have a job to go back to anyway, according to the many texts I'd gotten. I had all the goddamn time in the world. I was just about to leave when something came to mind. The two officers who'd picked me up were still waiting by their car when I turned back to them. Sorry, you picked up the guy I called in about at the diner, right? I asked.
Sure did.
You got any idea what happened to him? The two looked at one another for a moment, shrugged, and turned to me.
Didn't have any ID and gave a fake name. I think they took him to psych.
Psych?
Well, he was saying some, strange things. There were interviews with
The two quieted down and flashed me a smile.
There's not that much we can say.
Coming home, I decided to get to the root of this. It didn't take me that long to find the place where the guy'd been taken. There aren't a lot of mental health facilities in this part of the country, especially facilities that accept involuntary subjects. But my eyes kept drifting back to the strange dollar bills he'd given me, resting neatly on my nightstand. They were so detailed. A bit old, sure, but that only made them seem more genuine. What the hell was he doing with a handful of clearly fake dollar bills? Like, what's the purpose? There had to be a purpose. That unnerved me. I managed to arrange a meeting. It wasn't easy, and I think a lot of it boiled down to the police having no idea what could make this guy talk. For some reason, he kept providing them with false information. Maybe a familiar face, for one reason or another, might make him talk. Just a couple of days later, I was putting my items in a metal bowl on the second floor at a mental health institute in the next town over. I asked one of the nurses if I could keep one of my dollar bills. Apparently, that was okay. I was shuffled through a couple of locked doors and escorted to an off-white side room. No decor, no locks. The guy was already there. He'd been dressed down into these neutral eggshell white garbs. It was strange seeing him in a lit-up room like this. I didn't know what to expect. Getting a closer look at him, he was probably in his 50s. It had been hard to tell earlier. I couldn't get over just how pale he was. It was almost a complete lack of pigment. It looked sickly. His thin arms didn't help. He looked malnourished. And yet, he was smiling.
Hello?
He said. Hello to you too. I smiled. You doing okay?
I'm pretty good.
He nodded.
Thank you.
I sat down across from him and took out the dollar bill he'd given me. I wanted to ask you about this.
For the bacon.
He said matter-of-factly. Excuse me?
Sorry, was that not enough?
No, it's... I took a moment to compose myself. I had too many questions. He sighed, took the bill, and looked it over. Looking back at me, I could tell there was something painful stirring in his mind. His smile slowly faded.
Sorry.
He said.
I try to forget sometimes. It's easier than making sense of it.
Let's start with something simple. I nodded. Like, your name. Where you're from.
Those things are pretty far from simple.
He was looking straight through me, his eyes sinking back to deeper, more uncomfortable thoughts. His name was Samuel, and he was born around these parts and back in the 1970s. He'd worked as a telecommunications specialist out of St. Cloud back in the 90s. He had a wife, 3 children, and a 4-bedroom house.
But That was all before, see?
He explained.
Then it all just...
Just what? I asked. What happened? He looked at me, opening and closing his mouth, looking for the right words to come out. Nothing happened. He shook his head, trying again.
It started with the street preachers.
He said.
Hundreds of them, marching on every city, all saying the same doomsday shit as always. World was dying, all coming to an end.
I haven't seen anything like that.
Then there were storms.
He continued without skipping a beat.
Some would last for weeks, others longer. Entire cities would be flooded or torn apart. Earthquakes causing monster waves along the east coast, sending shockwaves all the way to mainland Europe. Then, Yellowstone.
Yellowstone?
Yeah.
He nodded.
Lights out.
Samuel was painting this apocalyptic vision of a world undone. Catastrophe after catastrophe. Hooded people marching the streets, screaming for the mercy of a mad god. But there was more to it.
Then things stopped making sense. It's as if the rules changed.
He continued.
Roads would stop leading home. Trees would change color. People turned twisted and corrupted. Like one of our neighbors couldn't eat anything but gunpowder. There was a woman just down the street who tried to kill anyone wearing glasses. It was pandemonium.
I didn't say anything. What he was saying didn't make any sense, but he was trying his best to keep his rambling coherent.
The plants died. Trees, too. The only thing that could grow in that environment were these twisted blue things that popped up out of nowhere. But people are what got twisted the most.
He told me of these towering, 7-foot-tall humanoid creatures that roamed the forests. Black as night, not even reflecting light. Arms reaching all the way to their knees. Elongated, inhuman things that all used to be someone he knew.
The doomsayers all said the same thing.
He continued.
That God was a scared little boy, and that he was dying. Everything that was happening was just an expression of that ceaseless, bottomless, existential grief.
Samuel looked back and forth, finally burying his face in his hands.
It all broke down. Roads stopped leading anywhere. No power, no water. Julie changed. Ollie changed. Toby made himself a mask and wandered off into the woods. Ira just disappeared. And for years, has it been years? It's just been me.
But you're here now, I said. And what you're describing, it didn't happen.
It happened.
He insisted.
Just not here, but here.
He tapped his finger on the $1 bill.
Somewhere, somehow, I must have taken a wrong turn. I slipped through something broken and now I'm here. And he's coming to bring me back. He doesn't want anyone to leave.
Who?
Just.
He chuckled.
Just a sad little boy who's been told he's going to die.
I didn't know what to say. I just sat with him for a while, holding his hand. Before I left, Samuel got up from his chair. He looked at me, forcing himself to smile.
If I go back, I'll try not to be like them. I'll try, and I'll be the one to say something.
He let out a painful little laugh, shaking his head.
Maybe just a hello.
I left that day with more questions than answers. I couldn't picture the world he'd lived through. Then again, how could it be true? None of it had happened. But what was he gaining from lying about it? That was the last time I saw Samuel. A few days later, he went missing, as if he'd disappeared into thin air. I didn't know what to think of it. There was nothing on the cameras. No one entering or leaving the building. No quick escapes, no clever plans. He'd just walked into his room and disappeared. Nothing left but a couple of moths fluttering about. And for a while, that was it. That was the end of the story. I got busy looking for a new job, and all the little items given to me by Samuel was put away into a little box in my glove compartment. Life soldiered on, and no matter how many questions I had, there was no one around to answer them. Even the strange kid that had been following me was, seemingly, gone. A couple of months later, I was driving home from a friend's place. I stopped at a four-way street, waiting for a couple of trucks to pass, when there was a knock on the passenger side window. I almost choked on my own spit. Scared me half to death. Looking out, I could see that kid again. I hadn't seen him for some time, and I quickly bounced between curiosity and downright anger. "What do you want?" I yelled out. There was no response. Instead, the door just opened. It had been locked. As he opened the door, he pointed to the glove box. "You want his things?" I asked. "Is that it?" He nodded. I wanted to lash out, but there was something telling me I shouldn't. Instead, I reached over, opened the glove compartment, and pointed to the box. "Just take it and leave me alone," I said. "Get it over with." He reached in and grabbed the box. So much effort for a couple of mementos. I turned my head back to face the road. The kid backed out. But of course I had to get the last word in. "Not even a thank you, huh?" That made him pause. He looked at me, tilting his head. As he opened his mouth to speak, a moth fluttered out. Then another. And another. Then darkness. What happened next is hard to describe. My memory of it is fragmented. It's like trying to watch a buffering video, where long stretches of it are just nothing. But you know something was supposed to happen in between. Blink. I was sitting in my car. There was a dark blue sky. No clouds, no stars. Figures in the distance. An open field with blue flowers bending to a howling wind. A powerful stench of ammonia stinging my nostrils. Something to my immediate left, ripping the car door straight off the hinges. Blink. Running. Ruins of a town. It seemed familiar, but there was barely anything left. My leg was bleeding. I was being followed. No matter where I turned or where I ran, I seemed to end up at the same intersection. Blink. A 3-story building brimming with life. Glimpses of arm-long antennae through the broken windows. Clickety-clack of bursting wings tapping against crumbling concrete. A loud warning shriek as something rubs its legs together. A call for prey. Blink. Hiding in a tipped-over trash container. The rain has stopped in midair. Raindrops held in indefinite suspension. I suck water drops out of the air to quench my thirst. My hands are shaking from the blood loss. Countless little images. Some in order, some not. I have no idea how much time passed. In the moment, it must have been much longer than I can remember. Days. Weeks, even. There's no way to tell. Blink. Walking through a barren field. It feels like walking through a dead forest, but there are no trees. Only those willingly impaled and wailing. Blink. An abandoned booth by a broken highway. A sign offers phone calls in exchange for real teeth. There are 6 sizes of pliers hanging on a wall within. All are bloodied, even the small ones. Blink. The church that had burned down the night before had reappeared. The people inside, too. They couldn't leave. Tonight, they would burn again. Somewhere in this nightmarish, puzzle-pieced fragment of nothing, there was a constant drive in me to get away. To get out. I knew that if I'd gotten there, I could get back home again. I just had no idea how. Maybe finding the kid. Asking. Begging. Something. The last fragment of memory from that space was being cornered in a cellar. They were banging on the door. I tipped over a wardrobe to keep them out, but they weren't going to stop. They were never going to stop. I couldn't let them kill me again. Not like that. One of the changed ones were coming. I don't know what that means, or how I know the name, but I knew of it. There was a mirror, and I could see the signs. It stepped out. 7 feet tall, black as night. Elongated arms and neck. Barely a body at all. Just a void space vaguely shaped like the remnants of a person. Except this one felt familiar. It was the first one to speak.
H-E-L-L-O.
Blink. Running. A cold hand. If I squeezed too hard, my fingers went straight through it. I had to keep up. He was showing me something. Blink. They were flooding over the school bus, tipping it by their sheer numbers. Eruptions from the sewer grates. They were famished. Blink. An open field. Sunflowers facing me no matter where I turn. It's not far. Blink. I look back as I'm pushed over the edge. He looks just like the rest of them. They aren't angered by his betrayal. They feel nothing, as I fall. In February of 2017, I was found by the side of the road. I'd been gone for months. My car was too. I came back with nothing but the clothes on my back and countless scars. I've been told that I didn't make any sense at first. I was just rambling nonsense. Or maybe it just sounded like nonsense to these people. Over time, I forgot more and more of these fragmented images. And the less I remember, the more I can move on. Still, I've written them down over time, and they paint an ugly, insane picture of what I'd been going through. Some of which I, myself, have a hard time believing. Then again, I know myself well enough to see that there's no point in lying. I haven't seen Samuel, or that strange kid ever since. I think this is all over for now. There's nothing left for me to give. But even now, years later, I still wake up to that feeling at night. That there's something wrong, or that I'm forgetting something. That there's something near that I'm looking straight through or past. And every now and then I hear the flutter of a moth's wing tapping against my bedroom window. And I think I know what it wants. It wants me to go back.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man with a string of bad luck gets a job at a prison when a strange man seems to know him all too well. So, whatever you do, stay away from the blue-handed inmate.
A few years back, I had the worst streak of bad luck in my entire life. My dad, my one living parent, got run over at a pedestrian crossing. My fiance left me, I lost my job at the warehouse, and I had to move to the outskirts of town because of a sudden rent spike. My one stroke of good luck was my friend Garrett. He mainly worked the commissary at a nearby prison, and he told me they were looking for more people, mainly night crew, but the pay was solid. There was a trial period and 2 weeks of on-the-job learning, but it was all paid for. In my position, how could I say no? So I started my job as a corrections officer just outside of Tomskog, Minnesota. The place was partly owned by a private company, but it was basically the same logo you'd see all over town. Hatchet Pharma has a finger in everything around here. I got the uniform, I met the inmates. I went through the routine, and I got to know who to keep my eyes on. I had to fire my taser after 3 weeks on the job, but that was pretty much the highlight. Most of the time is just sitting around, waiting for something to happen or breaking up loud conversations. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, but you gotta be ready for when it counts. In December of 2021, I was assigned to a new route. One of the people working with inmates in solitary confinement had to quit over a health scare, and I was next in line to take his place. It was still a night gig, but in a deeply disturbing part of the jail. Now, I won't paint it to be something it's not. Isolation is just a whole bunch of people keeping to themselves. Usually not even that many. Sure, the Tomskog facility has a slightly higher solitary capacity than normal, but we're talking 10 to 20% at most. Still, you need someone there at all times. You never know what they can come up with, and they're trickier than they look. There was this one guy at the end of the hall who just gave me the creeps. The other guards called him Mary, short for a longer biblical name I could never remember. He always broke the lights in his cell, and he was rumored to be extremely violent. Even in solitary confinement, he had to wear shackles. Every time he received his food, he had to put his hands out and have the shackles removed so he could eat. That's basically the only part of him I ever saw, his hands. The cell was always pitch black. The guy used to be an academic. Mary had 3 doctorates, but one day he just snapped. Killed 3 of his students. He also had some kind of chemical burn on his arms, leaving most of the skin on his hands discolored. Silver poisoning, possibly. Even his files were strange, stamped with a sort of blue flower. Most inmates had a stamp on their file, but he was the only one with a sunflower. The guy refused to eat during the day, so I was the one to feed him on the night shift. Every time I removed those shackles, I'd see those gnarled blue hands reach for me, or the tray, whichever. One of those nights, we were having beef stew. Nothing fancy to look at, but the thing smelled divine. I brought him some bread on the side, a little Jell-O box, and a bottle of water. Everyone else was fast asleep, apart from a newbie who couldn't stop crying at the end of the corridor. Same procedure as last time, I said, hands up front. Those elongated fingers slowly slid out, as if giving me an invisible fruit. The shackles clattered. I put down the tray, got the keys, and started twisting the locks back and forth. These were always a pain to deal with.
You're going to let me out.
Mary said, "Oh,
I need you to, so you're going to.
yeah, I don't see that happening, buddy." I unlocked his shackles and fetched his tray. He took it, but lingered for a second.
You're going to.
He said with no hint of a joke.
It's already decided.
Well, no one showed me that memo, I chuckled. You good in there?
Someone said bad things happened to you,
Mary said.
and that's why you're here.
Well, that makes 2 of us. Have a nice dinner. I walked away, but couldn't help but to look back as those long fingers slid back inside the dark room. Gave me the creeps every time. And sure, I had to get the tray and cuff him back up in a bit, but that was just part of the job. The next night was fish sticks. Not too shabby, but far from fresh. There were only 3 people in solitary that night. 2 guys who tried to kill each other, and Mary. Always Mary. As soon as I approached, those blue hands slid back out. I had to look away. There was something about the texture of his hands that made me feel weird. Like they were always a bit too slick. Like a thin cover of soap. This time, he didn't skip a beat.
You're going to let me out.
He said,
It's already decided.
"You keep saying it, but this door seems just as sturdy today as it did yesterday."
If you come in, you'll see why you're going to let me out.
You mean if I open this door without any kind of backup or supervision? Yeah, I got a pretty good idea why you'd get out if I did.
That's not it.
I unlocked his shackles and he took his tray. It disappeared into the darkness, but Mary kept talking.
You being here is proof that I made it.
He said,
That I'll get out.
"I'm not following."
They told me you lost a lot of things. Your dad, your girl, your apartment.
There was poison in his words. Deep, seething poison. I'll be honest, I wanted to break his goddamn hands when he said it. But what bothered me more was where he'd heard it from. There was no one around to talk to him. And as a rule, we didn't talk to inmates about our personal lives. Neither our own, nor that of other employees. Someone must have slipped up. "Look, that's personal," I said. "That's none of your business."
Then how do I know your dad got hit by a white Corolla?
I banged on the door. I didn't even know why. It was just this instinctual reaction to shut him up. But of course, that just made him laugh. How the hell did he know? It had been a hit and run, and the color of the car was only a footnote in the police report. "That's not funny," I spat. "And you're not making any new friends by being an asshole,"
I don't care, little man,
he continued.
because you're going to let Mr. out.
"Not on my goddamn life." I took the tray back from him before he finished his dinner, and I shackled him right back up. He didn't resist. It shut him up for a while, but it was a faint victory. I asked to be transferred to another shift, but there just wasn't any other people available. Hiring was rough. We were basically on our own. If we lost one person to sickness, we'd be shit out of luck at that point. So, no, there was no option to switch. It couldn't be done. I didn't want to go back to Mary. I really didn't. I didn't know who was talking to him, and I didn't like what he was saying. I'd checked and double-checked, and there was no mistaking that white Corolla. It had gone 60 on a 30 bias street and killed him on impact before disappearing down a dirt road. The thing was just gone. Police said it might have been deliberate, that it was too fast to be an accident. and in my mind's eye, I could see blue hands on the steering wheel. When I walked up to Mary's cell with a tray of meatballs and mashed potatoes, I was genuinely scared of what he might say. Every word felt like a threat. Could he really say something to make me let him out? What if he could? What would it be? Hands out, I said, knocking on his door.
You're not letting me out tonight.
He sighed.
I know that, but it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I shrugged. That's all I want to do.
Did they tell you what I did? How I did it?
I got a pretty good picture.
Helium poisoning. Painless asphyxiation. They didn't feel a thing.
I didn't respond. I just took off his shackles and gave him the tray.
I'm not a monster, you know.
He added,
I just do what I have to do.
eat up and leave the tray, I said as I walked off.
Maybe ask your ex about Beverly.
He shouted through the slit in the door. I could almost see his lips moving.
I'm sure you'll find it an illuminating conversation.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to think about it. But goddammit, there was something there. In the last fight we'd had, she'd shouted that name. Beverly. I didn't know of Beverly, and at that moment, I didn't care. But it was such a specific name. The chance that Mary just picked it up on random was improbable. So the next day, before my shift, I decided to give my ex a call. Things had calmed down, after all. There was a cold greeting, and even colder small talk. Finally, she just called me out.
Just tell me what you want.
She asked. I want to talk about Beverly, I said. You said her name once.
What, you're getting remarried? Want to bury the hatchet?
No, what?
You want me to forgive you? Give you my blessing?
What are you talking about? There was a moment of silence. She scoffed.
The skank you're dating.
I'm not dating a Beverly, I said. Nick, never have.
Don't give me that shit. I saw your emails, her videos, her Insta.
Look, I don't know any Beverly. She screamed her username and cut the call. I got online and looked her up. Beverly was maybe 8 years younger than me and absolutely stunning. She'd only been active for a few months, where she'd upload a sort of daily video blog. It was heartbreaking. In every post, she talked about the issues of being the other woman. A vlog kind of thing. Daily outfit posts, memes, a sort of strange mix. This is the woman she thought I'd been involved with? Through some kind of email? It didn't make sense. And how the hell did Mary know about this? This haunted me. I didn't know what to think, and I felt myself coming back to Mary in his blue hands. I had this constant sense of him being with me, looking at me. It felt like I was missing something. I could feel that strange, slick texture as the hands wrapped around my neck whenever I let my mind wander. I could feel his presence in the backseat of my car, riding along with me. And once at a stop sign, I heard him clear as day, right behind me.
You're gonna let me out!
But there was no one there. The next time I went back, I skipped the tray. We were gonna figure this out. I finished my coffee and thundered down the hall, ignoring the other inmates. Mary had some explaining to do, and I was goddamn terrified of what he was gonna say. But I needed to hear it. You're gonna tell me what you know right now, I said. I've had my black coffee, and I'll break your goddamn hands.
You let me out, and it'll all be clear.
Chuckled Mary.
I promise. It's kind of written on the wall at this point.
I smacked my nightstick against the door. No more fucking games.
Then come in. Teach me a lesson. Open the door.
I calmed down. Maybe this was how he got to me, tricking me. That wasn't gonna work, no way.
Your shift starts at 10:15.
Mary said.
You take your coffee black, and you came here the first thing you did. Hold on.
He shuffled off into the back of the cell. There was a strange scratching sound, and he was gone for a solid minute. I just listened, trying to figure him out. I shone a flashlight inside, but he'd hung up a sheet over the slit in the door. I couldn't see anything without going inside.
So, there was your dad. You reacted to that. Then a Beverly. That worked. What made you lose your last job? Was it, let's say a failed drug test? Yeah, that'll work.
What the hell are you talking about?
And you don't do drugs. Probably some kind of error. Maybe a few. Poppy seed pastries for breakfast. those things can give a false positive.
I just stood there, mouth wide open. The morning of the mandatory drug test, I'd had 3 pastries with poppy seeds. The bakery down the street were giving them away as a promotional event. I got this awful pit in my stomach, like he knew more about me than I did. Like he was about to tell me something horrible. Like he was standing right behind me, just soaking up my fear.
So that brought you here. I'll have to figure that out later. Maybe you know someone here.
He continued. Shut up, I said through the door. I'm telling you to shut up. I looked over my shoulder. There was no one else here. Why was I feeling watched?
Calm down.
Mary said.
We're getting to the end. You're about to let me out.
Never, I spat. You're gonna fucking rot in there.
Don't you understand?
He yelled back.
The fact that you're here proves that I'm right.
How? That doesn't make any goddamn sense. And he told me everything. Mary, or Meridian, was given an opportunity. If he followed a very specific set of events, he would be given a great gift.
Non-locality,
He said.
but you need to dissociate hard enough. Basically turn yourself crazy enough for reality not to make sense anymore. Or rather, for you as a person not to make sense to reality. The other way around.
As a part of this delusion, he killed 3 of his students. He burned himself with chemicals. Then, seemingly as part of his plan, he willingly went to jail.
Years of darkness.
He added.
Isolation. Like being in a sensory deprivation tank. I need it. I crave it. Then I'm done.
And all for what?
To be unbound. No causality, no rules, non-linearity. And the fact that you're standing here is all the proof that I need to know that it is going to work.
And why is that?
Don't you get it?
A blue hand slipped out of the slit in the door and pointed at me.
I did this to you. I put you here. Someday, you will let me out. Because if you didn't, I wouldn't get you to come here. And that time is drawing close. I don't need this darkness anymore. I feel it. I'm done.
That's impossible, I said. That's literally impossible.
Then why are you sliding down the wall? Feeling sleepy?
I hadn't even noticed. I was nodding off, right there in the hall. I tried touching my face to see if I could feel anything.
Did you? Yes.
Mary said,
I drugged you. I couldn't have if you hadn't told me about the black coffee. But now that you did, I could. It's on the list. It's all on the list. And what's on the list is going to happen.
I don't understand.
Imagine you could travel through time.
He chuckled.
Not today, but someday. And you promise yourself that you're gonna put a rose outside your door on this very day, in this very present. And when you open your door, the rose is there, then you would know that you're gonna get that power. You know you will come here someday. Then it all comes down to strength of will, to force yourself to remember all that you're going to do, and in the correct order.
That's not... An image flashed in my head. Blue hands on the steering wheel of a white Corolla. A man paying the bakery to promote some pastries. A woman being paid for a bit of internet theater by an unknown benefactor. There were dozens of people standing at the end of the hallway. Thin, emaciated men. Men with long fingers and blue hands. I blacked out. I woke up in the staff room with a nurse looking into my eyes. They gave me a checkup and sent me home to rest up. They gave me a few days off just to make sure. I didn't know what to say. I had my keys, and Mary was still in his cell. If I was the one to let him out, all I had to do to make sure that didn't happen was to stay away. That'd ruin his plans. So, taking a few days off seemed perfectly fine. As I was about to leave, Gareth met me in the parking lot. He jogged out to say goodnight and see if I was okay.
Look,
He said,
I know you hate that shift, but don't worry about it. They're moving him, and I've heard talks of approving a shift change. He'll be someone else's problem, and you'll be back in cell block D.
What do you mean?
They heard how much he was messing with you,
Gareth said.
and decided it just wasn't worth it. They're moving him. We can't lose you.
What? Why?
Gee, I thought this was good news.
No, I don't know. I don't know. Gareth patted my shoulder and sent me on my way. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain it? Did I even believe it? I got in my car and took a deep breath. A strange chemical smell. I noticed something on the passenger seat. A letter. I took a deep breath and opened it.
Thanks for the help.
It said,
This one's on me.
a little smiley face and a $100 bill. I just stared at it. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. For a heartbeat, all I could see were blue hands, simultaneously smacking my car. I shot out of the driver's seat, but there was no one outside, just an empty parking lot. Still, I couldn't help but feel watched. My pulse pounded behind my eyes, almost popping a blood vessel. They were out there. He was out there, watching me from the dark. He was still getting out. I knew he was all around me, unbound. He could stab me, push me over, whatever. He'd be there and then not, and I'd be helpless. I got this intense sense of paranoia washing over me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I just dug my fingers into my hair, trying to force my mind out of that dark pit. This was my doing. I'd let him treat me like shit, and because of it, they were going to move him. During that move, he'd get out. He must have planned it, and I couldn't do shit about it since I was off duty. I took another look at that $100 bill, and the thought occurred to me. There was something I could do. I went to the gas station. I came back the next day with a backpack. I showed my credentials and told the gatekeep that I was there to fetch something from my locker. It was fine. Danny knows me. I got in on the day shift and waved at the others. A few of them asked how I was doing, what I was doing, the regular chit-chat. All smiles and waves. Prison transfers takes place in the early afternoon. It'll only be a short walk, but that might be all he needed to escape. I used my keys to get past cell block D. I knew I'd get stuck on camera, but I also knew that the prisoners were out in the yard. No one was watching the tapes. Not this close to lunch. I walked straight into the solitary ward and all the way up to Mary's door.
Wait,
He said,
you're here?
yeah.
No, that doesn't make any sense.
Send me home then. Have someone shoot me. I'm waiting.
No, wait, that doesn't... Hold on!
There was a shuffle as Mary hurried into the back of his cell. I couldn't feel them here. We were alone. I unzipped my backpack and took out a door stopper. I shoved it under the door. That thing wasn't moving anytime soon. I stepped over to the fire alarm and pulled the handle. The emergency doors opened with a violent blaring siren. Every door swung open, but Mary's. I was lucky that time. No one in the solitary ward but Mary and I.
Hold on. What are you doing?
I took out one more thing from my backpack, a can of gasoline. I shoved it through the slit in the door, tearing down the sheet he'd hung up.
Oh, you're killing me. That's what this is?
Yeah. And I see no little blue hands trying to stop me. So I guess it's working.
Maybe you're missing the point. Maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to.
And how exactly is that a bad thing if it keeps you from getting out? Half a can was enough. It was leaking under the door. I took out a gasoline-soaked rag, lit it on fire, and tossed it through the slit. For a split second, the room lit up. The walls, the bed, even Mary. I got a short view of the room as it was, and what he was doing in there. He had drawn things on the walls and the floor. White Corolla, Beverly, poppy seeds, black coffee. The wall was full of things. Arrows, lines, and squares, all related to me. These were all things he was going to do when he got out. And he was so convinced that I was the one to let him out. So convinced that it had all started to happen. And then there was Mary himself. He was more bone than man. Sunken eyes like he hadn't slept for weeks. He'd torn his hair out and bit off his fingernails. This was a completely senseless man. And he stared at me with unblinking eyes. But in that moment, as the flames started to lick him and the fire spread into the hallway, he looked me in the eyes and smiled. I just bolted out of there. Hundreds of inmates were gathering in the yard, and I could already hear sirens. I could see flames bursting out of the solitary ward. Before the firefighters could get there, one of the walls completely collapsed, and I saw him. Just for a brief second, I saw that emaciated man standing in the flames, holding his hands out like he was receiving a gift. The chemicals in his arms ignited with a bright green. They'd burned straight through the wall, and the thought hit me. Technically, he was out. He might be on fire, but he was out. And in that split second, in that heartbeat, he vanished, like snuffing out a candle. Hours later, the fire was put out. It didn't spread. Turns out that part of the jail had a peculiar type of stone that was weak to high temperatures. The stonework just crumbled. Some kind of exposure to a certain chemical. A blue one with a green flame. The construction crew had cheaped out on materials many years ago. There were no recordings. They'd forgotten to change the tapes from last night. There were no visitors' logs. Barely anyone remembered me even being there. And lastly, there was no body recovered in that cell. As I got back in my car, I just held my breath, waiting for something to happen. A knife at my throat. Possibilities passed through my mind. In another place, it all really happened. Violent images of myself getting stabbed, burned, tortured, and flayed. A world where everyone turned to ash, and I was placed in front of a throne of bone as a prize jester. Dark figures rising from the earth, tearing the world apart, breaking the ground like an eggshell. I cried. It was seconds away, at most. But minutes passed. I found a letter on the passenger seat. It hadn't been there seconds a cog. It took me a solid 15 minutes to work up the courage to open it.
You got me out.
It said with a smiley face. And there was another $100 bill.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man taking time off to himself is visited by a swamp monster. So, have you been fishing? And have you seen Melonhead?
Late last summer, I was going north for my brother's wedding. It was at the start of my vacation, so I decided to make a few stops on my way up north. I'd make a stop for camping, another for a day of fishing, and so on. My brother, who was stopping in Minneapolis, was pushing hard for us to have a day to go shopping together, and I was just not feeling it. He was all head in the clouds, in love, and talking about his blissful future, and it just soured my mood. How could my younger brother surpass me in so many different ways? Never mind. I was passing through a small Minnesota town when I decided to make my first stop, fishing. That'd get me far from the blinding smile of my brother. It'd be just me, a six-pack, and all the time in the world. Deal. There was a lake that ran through the west side of town and curled into the woods. There was a dirt road coming around the back of the lake, opposite of the town. It'd probably take an hour or two just to trek back to town through the undergrowth. It was a pretty big lake. The locals seemed friendly enough at the gas station, and you didn't need a license to fish, so I figured, hell, why not? So I drove the long way around, parked my car, got my gear, and dug along the tree line for bait. It didn't take long to fill up a jar. I followed the path down to the lake, bait in hand. It was almost lunchtime, and I'd gotten a few sandwiches and a six-pack from a nearby gas station. I had this really comfy camping chair, an audiobook, and nowhere to be for the next 18 hours. Hell, if I skipped my Minneapolis shopping spree with Smiley McGee, I could stay an extra day out here. Also, this gave me an excellent excuse to just skip going there at all. Needless to say, I was psyched. As I walked up to the lake, I noticed a wooden sign, handmade and painted with a clear text, Melonhead. I stopped just to reread it a couple of times. Melonhead. What the hell was a melonhead? I took a picture of it and kept walking. As I got closer to the lake, I started hearing frogs. Like, a lot of frogs. There was this strong, intense smell of vegetation in the air. But as every good outdoorsman knows, frogs are basically a sign of a healthy ecosystem. Sure, in some environments they can be intrusive, looking at you, Australia. But that wasn't the case up north. I put up my camping chair on the beach. I took off my shoes and prepped 2 fishing rods. I put them into empty bottles that I dug into the sand so I could set them aside. I leaned back in my chair, cracked a cold one, and put a baseball cap over my face. As Will Patton started reading me the Bill Hodges trilogy, I completely zoned out. This was what I'd been working for all year. This was a proper vacation. I must have fallen asleep, probably for an hour or so. When I woke up, I'd completely lost track of my audiobook. My beer was warm by now, and my fishing bobbers had drifted all the way back to the beach. I got up, reeled in the lines, and reached for my bait, only to notice it was tipped over in the sand. Empty. Strange. I left my gear on the beach, got my shovel, and returned to the tree line. It took me longer to find bait this time, and I had to go a bit deeper. The frogs were a bit more quiet now, and there were a few clouds gathering on the horizon. I decided I wouldn't stay the night unless the rain passed me by. I didn't want to get stuck in a muddy tent overnight. I could sleep in the car, I suppose. As I got back to my camping chair, I got a bad feeling. Something seemed out of place. I wasn't sure exactly what, but it looked different. Something had been moved. Will Patton kept talking in my ear, but I was no longer hearing the story. By now it was just noise, like a friend who didn't know when to stop talking. As my phone chimed with a notification from my brother, I turned it off and took off my headphones. It took me a few seconds to realize that all the frogs had gone silent. I just stood there with my bait jar, hearing an eerie wind pass through the birch trees. I decided I'd give it another go. If it started to rain, I'd just sleep in my car. So I got back, threaded my bait, and threw my bobbers out one more time. I set my rods back up, put my headphones back on, and put away my lukewarm beer. As I brought up my phone and started rewinding the audiobook, I noticed a ripple on the lake. Not a big one, but a noticeable one. Probably fish breaching the surface. Maybe this wasn't a lost cause after all. Just a few minutes later, the first bobber dipped under the surface. It immediately came back up, but now I knew that fish were biting. Moments later, the second bobber dipped. I held my breath, waiting to see the bobbers dip for real. There were fish there, it was only a matter of time, but minutes passed and I got a strange feeling. I reeled in one of the bobbers and noticed the bait was completely gone. I reeled in the second one, and it was the same. Bait was gone. Very determined and skilled fish in this lake, definitely. I decided to try something different. I brought up my box of spinners and found a black and blue lure that usually worked on bass. My best rod had a spinning reel, so that'd work just fine. I set it up, stepped up to the edge of the beach, and threw it out. Solid, beautiful arc way into the lake. Half an hour passed, and I just got back into the rhythm. The click of the spinning reel, the smoothness of the line. It was nice. Just nice. Then, a bite. Not a big one, but a bite. Finally, I hooked it and started reeling. Not twitching, just a solid, steady reel. Probably not a big fish, about a pound at most. But now I had something to show. Would probably make a neat Insta post or something for my Tinder profile. Laugh at it if you want. It works. My lure was about halfway back when the line suddenly snapped. It wasn't even from the pressure. It was as if the line was just cut. The fishing line snapped out of the water. I just dropped my rod in the sand and threw up my arms. "What the fuck?" I yelled to myself. "What the fuck was that?" And there, out in the lake, another ripple. I had enough. I packed up my things, trudged back up to my car, and dumped it all in the trunk. Even the lukewarm beer. I left the bait jar in the sand, though. These worms were useless. By the time I sat down in the driver's seat, the first raindrops had started spattering against the hood of my car. Then my phone chimed. Of course, the third time my brother was asking if I would make it to Minneapolis tomorrow. I groaned out loud. I couldn't take that kind of toxic positivity. I just couldn't. I needed space. Sorry, I texted back. I just set up camp. I'm here for at least another day. So as to not make myself a liar, I decided I'd stay the night. I'd sleep in the car and just listen to my audiobook. That was a kind of camping, right? I had a tuna sandwich packed away, and my lukewarm beer was almost palpable. Not much of a dinner, but I didn't feel like going back to town. It felt more appropriate to just stay out in the woods. I put my headphones back on, turned off notifications, and let Will Patton creep back into my mind. As the clock crept later and later, my lukewarm beer was running out. About 9 p.m., after a long nap and checking my YouTube subscriptions, I had to take a bathroom break. The woods had gotten really dark, really fast. I didn't have to go far, so I just stepped out into the forest and did my business. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing. I could see the lake from there, and I noticed another ripple. It was bigger this time. I zipped up, walked back out on the dirt path, and took a second look. There was something in the lake. Nothing big, but something round, about the size of a basketball. I got back in my car and updated my Instagram. I was a bit pissy about not getting the fishing picture out of this trip, but hey, at least I got a picture of that weird sign. Maybe someone out there knew what it meant. So I took another look at the picture. I noticed two things. One, that round thing in the water can be seen in the background down by the lake. Two, there's a small spatter of color at the very top of the sign. It kind of looked like the sign was broken now that I looked closer at it. It gave me an idea. I took one more trip out of the car, following the dirt path. Now I could hear frogs again. They were getting louder. Probably the rain luring them out. Using my phone as a flashlight, I looked around the sign. Just as I suspected, there was a second part to it, just off the path. It had been broken in two. The text was clear. Don't feed. Don't feed Melonhead. What the... I started thinking about what I'd done all day. My bait jar going empty. Bait being picked from the hooks. My fishing line being cut. Had I been feeding whatever the hell kind of animal Melonhead was? I turned back to my car, only to see someone standing on the path. I didn't raise my phone. I didn't want to make any sudden movements. I just froze, like a deer in headlights. I could barely make out a humanoid shape, but I got this sudden realization that I was out, alone, in the middle of nowhere. And now something was blocking my path. It was tall, like 2 heads taller than me. It had sort of a hunchback, and these long, webbed fingers. It had this irregular breathing, rattling a large sack in its chest. It dropped my bait jar on the path in front of me. More. This awful gurgling noise. Somewhere halfway between a regurgitation and breathing in. I carefully picked up the jar and looked up. Whoever this was had this big melon-sized head. This was what I'd seen sticking out of the lake all day. It even had a tint of green. I need my shovel, I gasped. It's just... More! It stepped towards me with a splat. I fumbled backwards, tripping over my own feet. I crawled into the underbrush and just started digging with my hands. I stood there on my hands and feet, ripping into the ground with my fingers. Thick globs of something sticky dripped down as Melonhead loomed over me. Every now and then I felt something wiggle between my fingers as I filled the jar with dirt and worms. I held it up, and Melonhead just poured it over its face. The dirt was filtered out and spat back out as the jar was dropped back down next to me. More! I must have dug for hours. Just as soon as I filled the jar, it emptied it. Hour after hour, I just dug, and dug. Breaking my nails, having my fingertips cut by little rocks and roots. I have no idea how long I was there. Hours. An eternity. Every time I slowed down, there was this sound like a man-sized rattlesnake getting antagonized behind me. I even stopped pleading. I just kept going. The rain intensified, drenched me, but I couldn't tell if my shivers came from fear or cold. At some point, when I held up the jar, it didn't take it. The sun was rising out of the dark clouds, and the frogs had gone quiet again. My knees crackled as I got back up, and my fingers were trembling. I was covered in dirt, and my clothes were soaked. There was no one there. I leaned against the closest tree, tried to find the right words, but instead just collapsed into crying. When I got back to my car, I plugged in my phone. As it charged, I called the one person I wanted there, my brother. I had to get away. I just drove, mindlessly. I have no memory of what I did or how I ended up at a gas station. I don't have the slightest idea how my brother found me there. I just remember being glad he did. It has taken me a long time to come to terms with what happened. For a while, I thought I'd had some kind of mental breakdown, thinking that what I experienced was just something I made up. I didn't talk about it. It sounded ridiculous to say out loud, but I really was there all night. I was on my hands and knees, digging. I wouldn't do that for nothing. I was there, and so was Melonhead. I decided to finally make this post after I found a couple of people posting a picture of that same sign on Instagram the other week. It was still broken in half, and right there in the background was that round thing bobbing in the water.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man facing hard times goes to a party to relieve some stress when he meets a maniac. So, are you aware of stranger danger? Because no matter what you do, don't talk to Stranger Tom.
When Sammy got sick, it was like stepping into a dark mirror world. We'd been economically well off with our 2 full-time jobs and a child-free lifestyle. So to suddenly step down to a single income was a wake-up call. Not to mention how the insurance companies managed to weasel out of paying for more than half of Sammy's treatment. Disgusting. Sammy swung for the fences. She took it all in stride. We had our ups and downs with every doctor's visit, but we always ended taking steps back rather than forward. There was always next time, they said, but we figured we were quickly running out of next times. 1 year down the line, Sammy was on a downward spiral. By then, the catastrophic had turned tragically mundane. I did everything I could to keep her spirit up, but at that point, her light was faded. We barely spoke anymore. A work friend of mine, Barry, was having a bachelor party. He was pulling out all the stops. I was never planning on going, but Sammy insisted I should.
You need to get out of the house for a bit.
She smiled.
Do something normal for a while.
I protested, but seeing her light up for the first time in weeks was enough to break my guard. She was so happy to see I still had friends out there. How could I say no? I agreed to be the designated driver. I wouldn't be gone for more than a day, and I'd just be a phone call away. Sammy didn't seem to need that kind of reassurance. It was mostly for me. This was in November. Barry was having a December wedding and wanted all his pals to come along for one big night. Sure, I was just a work friend, but when you're in your mid-30s, you gotta take what you get, friends-wise. And Barry certainly took what he could, inviting no less than 25 people. So in mid-November, I packed my bags and stepped on board a party bus, heading for Annapolis. There were drinks and dinner at the hotel, then a few hours of losing money on the craps table. I gambled away about $200 at the roulette table, but magically won about $600 playing blackjack. After months of losing battle after battle, it felt good to finally win. I gotta admit, I was getting into it. Not as much as Barry's best man, Jake, the guy wearing goggles who spelled out boobs. But hey, that's hard to top. What a legend. Once it became apparent that there'd be no need for a designated driver, I just went along with it. 5 shots of mint schnapps later, and I started feeling a bit guilty. I called Sammy, but she laughed it off.
It's good to hear you slur.
She said,
You're a fun drunk.
Most of the night went by in a blur. More drinks, some dancing, lots of cheering for our main man Barry, flashing lights, people pulling us back and forth between dance floors, bars, and wandering the streets looking for a taco truck. I clearly remember sitting on a park bench at one point, listening to one of Barry's friends lecture me about roasted seed snacks. Something about antioxidants and digestion. I only remember the noise of it. I ended up back at the hotel. Jake had rented Barry this huge room, and 12 of us had made it all the way there, the after party. And the night was far from over, because of course there had to be exotic dancers. I crossed the line by getting completely bass-ackwards drunk, but that's about as far as I was willing to go. I gently but firmly declined to partake in any dancing. Instead, I retreated to the back of the room and enjoyed a cigar. Not a habit I'm very proud of, but it's one of those things my old man taught me to appreciate. A good cigar, a whiskey on the rocks. Hell, a man might forget his troubles for a while. Sometime after them replaying Pour Some Sugar on Me for the 6th time, the party was dying down. Some people were heading back to their rooms. Some did so with the company of a dancer. It was a wild night. But like most parties, the music dies. And at 3 in the morning, I was ready to let it. There were only 4 of us left by then. Barry, Jake, some guy named Ramsey, and I. We'd all crashed on a couch, telling stories about our wives, or in Barry's case, his wife-to-be. It was a wild party, but it was clear the guy was in love. Gotta respect that. Then a stranger walked in, at least 6'7", body like a scarecrow. Wore all black, except for a white shirt, white hair slicked back and combed. He had the most intense blue eyes I'd ever seen, like he could look straight through me if he wanted.
I see you gentlemen are enjoying yourselves.
He smiled.
I'm guessing the girls didn't disappoint.
They most assuredly did not.
Hiccuped Jake.
But we're married men here.
Oh, I can tell. If it wasn't for the cigars, all I'd smell in here is virtue.
That got a chuckle out of us. Jake introduced him as Tom, or Stranger Tom. Apparently, he was the kind of guy you'd talk to if you wanted to have a good time, anywhere from Pasadena to Kent Island. He co-ran several clubs, and he was an enthusiastic movie entrepreneur. I only had to see the color of his business cards to know exactly what kind of movies he made. Classy stuff. As we started winding down, our discussion drifted into a more philosophical nature. Barry kept saying how much he hoped this marriage would be the one. Jake was worrying about his youngest kid not making it through college. Ramsey was on the verge of crying, talking about his sick dog. And me? Well, I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to think about real life for a while. Stranger Tom took his feet off the coffee table, spilling an ashtray on the floor. He brought out this intricate silver lighter, engraved with a crow and a pair of sunflowers.
Let's imagine, if you would, that you could get answers to all those questions, he said. If you could know what things would look like with your wife 20 years down the line. If you could get a hint how to push your boy to the finish line, or how you could find just the right person to help your darling pooch make it just a little longer.
Yeah?
Grinned Barry, finishing the last drops of his drink.
That'd be worth something, wouldn't it?
Sure would,
Nodded Jake.
Well, how about it then?
Tom flicked open his lighter, and the steady blue flame shot out. Small, but bright as hell. It didn't flicker.
It'll cost you, but you'll get what you want. Price varies on the scope of the question.
Is this like a party trick? Like a Luigi board?
Chuckled Jake. The guys laughed. I couldn't hold back a snort myself.
Ouija board.
Ramsey corrected.
Luigi is the, Mario guy.
Whatever. Tom, is it like that?
Nah,
Stranger Tom smiled.
I assure you, it ain't nothing like that.
He turned his attention to me, eyeing me up and down. There was this strange smile on his face, and the man never seemed to blink. Even then, as drunk as I was, I could tell he was creepy as shit. I'm good, I smiled. You guys go ahead.
Surely you want to know something. Something good.
I looked down at my empty glass. Tom was getting on my nerves. Playing on the worries of drunk people is one of the lowest ways to trick someone out of a cheap buck. Reminded me of a televangelist, but without the promise of paradise. Sure, I nodded. I'm calling you out, Tom. I want you to tell me the color of my lucky boxers. The ones I wore at my wedding.
That's it?
That's it,
Fair enough.
said Tom.
Now take a good hard look and just tell me one thing.
We all focused on the silver lighter with the little blue flame. Unflickering, steady, like an oil painting.
Do you submit?
He asked. We did. It all happened in an instant. This one loud snap, like a choir of carrots breaking in unison. Jake's right arm, fragmented in 3 places. I could see bone poking out in different directions, breaking through the skin. Ramsey's jaw snapped and 3 teeth rolled out of his mouth, tapping against the side of the table as they tumbled across the floor. Barry's left leg seemingly exploded, cracking wide open from ankle to hip. And me? A sting on my index finger, nothing more. For a second, there were no screams, just these blank stares as we were drawn into the blue light. There was no panic, no agony, just realization.
Yes.
Said Jake in perfect clarity.
Yes, that's how.
She's still beautiful.
Muttered Barry. Ramsey tried to talk, but ended up slurring with his broken jaw. Blood-mixed spit poured out of the corner of his mouth, along with 2 more teeth. I sat there looking at these 3 broken men as Stranger Tom lit a cigarette. It was like 3 puppets who'd had their strings cut, talking out loud like wind-up dolls. Tom held the lighter aloft, keeping the blue flame bright and steady. He looked me dead in the eye, his smile growing wider.
They were red,
He said.
with little white petals.
He closed the lighter, and our collective consciousness went out, along with the blue flame. Waking from a dreamless sleep, I remember screaming. It stank of blood, and I could see dark brown spots across the floor and furniture. There were 2 EMTs giving Barry chest compressions, and someone lifting Jake out of his chair. Ramsey was nowhere to be seen. It was bright outside. Someone was trying to get me out of my chair.
Make room.
They yelled.
Get out.
Is he dead? Oh my God, is he dead? I leaned against an unknown hotel staffer as she helped me out of the room. The second I was out, the hangover and chalk buckled me over. I hurled all over the carpet. The hallways were covered in confused guests as a flurry of people rushed past me. I only caught a glimpse of Barry's arm. It was white as snow. I had nothing but a bruise on my index finger. It was chaos. EMTs running back and forth, screams in the hallway, in the rooms. Someone just kept yelling, "What's wrong with Barry?" over and over again. My heart was beating so fast that I could barely hear it. Stranger Tom had been absolutely right. My lucky boxers were red with white petals. I got them for my wedding day. They always managed to bring Sammy a smile. They were just this bright reminder of happier days. So of course they were lucky, but I couldn't stop staring at my index finger. I'd asked a small question and paid a small price. Was it that simple? Was it real? Really real? Barry's fiancée promised to inform us as soon as she heard something about his condition. One of the other guests offered me a ride home. One by one, we left the town in silence. All the while, I couldn't stop thinking about that tall man with the silver lighter. By the time I got home, Sammy had already heard the news. She hobbled all the way to the front door, almost dropping her cane as she flung herself at me. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling a tinge of ache in my finger.
Thank God you're okay.
She sobbed.
They said it was an accident.
I didn't want to worry her. She had so much on her mind as it was. I don't know, honey, I lied, kissing her head. I was out cold. The next few weeks, I got a lot of updates. Barry had started to recover. Jake was so messed up they had to amputate parts of his lower arm, along with 2 fingers. Ramsey had to drink his dinner for the foreseeable future, but he was doing better. I tried to put it all out of my head. I had more immediate things to deal with, even if that blue flame haunted my nightmares. I sometimes imagined Stranger Tom sitting at the edge of my bed, asking me if there was anything I liked to know. And of course there was, but this was badness. There's no such thing as wandering prophets and soothsayers. But when I saw an Instagram post of Ramsey hugging his dog, something ached in my heart. Maybe it was all real. Maybe I'd missed a real, actual opportunity. In early December, Sammy took a turn for the worse. Her parents were over every day to help out while I was at work, trying their best to get her to her various appointments. The doctors had all but given up, but were determined to finish the treatment nonetheless. Then came that one day. I'd forgotten about doing laundry and only had a single pair of underwear left. My lucky boxers, red with white petals. Putting them on even then brought a smile to Sammy's face. I decided that I wouldn't let the mundane win. I wouldn't wait for the worst to happen. I took time off work and went to see Jake. Jake was still on sick leave for his broken arm. I met him at a cafe downtown. We got ourselves a couple of bear claws. Without the boobs glasses, he almost looked like a person. We small talked about Barry and Ramsey and how they were doing better. Jake talked about his arm, how the 2 of us had lived through the wildest nights of our lives. Then he took a long look at me.
You really do have red boxers with white pedals, don't you?
He asked. I got a pair, yeah. He nodded, taking another sip of his steaming hot coffee. He looked out the window with a sigh.
My boy is doing better,
he said.
Turns out he's got an eye condition, gave him migraines.
So he's doing better?
Night and day.
Jake smiled.
It's nothing short of a miracle.
There was a pregnant pause as we just nodded at one another, drinking our coffee. Finally, I bit the bullet. Jake, I'm gonna need the number to Stranger Tom. Jake tried to help as best as he could, but it turns out it wasn't quite that simple. He'd met Tom through a friend of a friend of a friend. Backtracking wasn't as easy as it seemed. Jake gave me the number to a guy who worked at the casino we'd been to. That guy, in turn, directed me to a nightclub manager up in Halethorpe. It took me 2 days of emailing, texting, messaging, and unwanted calls to finally get to a clear lead. A dancer over in Ferndale told me she could set up a meeting with him for a price. It cost me all my blackjack winnings, but I finally had a time and address. Some guy who'd won the lottery had rented out a strip joint. Guess who their host was? It was a Friday night when I drove out there. The place was rented out and closed to the public. I slipped the bouncer a $100 bill, name-dropped the dancer I'd talked to, and promised I wouldn't cause any trouble. That did the trick. The party was going strong. Explosive music, dim red lights, smoke, champagne and sweat. Clinking bottles accompanied by cheers and groans. Not too different from a certain bachelor party. I could almost feel the champagne bubbles tickle my nose. And there at the bar sat none other than Stranger Tom. Walking up to him, I felt my heart sink into my stomach. This might be one big Hail Mary, or I could be the dumbest man on the entire East Coast. Tom turned in his seat, sliding a shot of whiskey my way. He didn't even look up.
I knew you'd be back,
he said, throwing me a side eye.
You have questions?
Just one.
It'll have to wait.
He smiled.
I got business.
He turned to face the partygoers. He raised a glass to them, getting a handful of cheers in return. Tom spoke under his breath, never dropping that unnerving smile.
Fucking clown monkeys.
As he turned, those piercing eyes dug deep into me. They seemed different now, stronger, angrier. I could have sworn they moved like fire.
I don't usually let people ask me twice,
he said.
Then again, most don't want to.
It's important, I said, and I'll pay the price.
Oh, I'm well aware. You come chasing me down, you gotta be hella desperate. Drink your whiskey.
I'm good.
I wasn't asking.
My heart skipped a beat. I chugged it, letting the liquid fire sink into my throat. My fingers tingled, and I could imagine the ache of my index finger. Just that tinge of pain with promises of more to come. Stranger Tom turned to face the bartender, ordering himself another shot of whiskey. Who are you? I asked. How do you do what you do?
I'm no one,
Tom said.
Who cares?
So you won't tell me? He held up his glass, letting the liquid reflect off of the colored lights. Suddenly, his silver lighter was on the table. I never saw him reach for it. It just sort of appeared.
I come from a land of a watchful red sun, where the snow is feathers and the shores are silver black, where all the flowers have choked to death, turning a sickly blue.
He tapped his lighter.
Like my fire.
While Tom slipped from table to table, refilling glasses and lighting cigarettes, I stayed at the bar. After a while, it all looked the same. Men, women dancing, sitting. It was all just meat, sweat, and fabric. Wedding rings reflecting the burst from a strobe light. Memorial tattoos grinding against exposed chests. My phone buzzed, and I knew it was Sam. I couldn't bring myself to read it. Long past midnight, I'd fallen asleep at the bar. I woke up as one of the girls wished the bartender a good night. Looking up, I saw Tom waving me over. Most of the place had cleared out, just a handful of guys left. Tom had the seat of honor at the edge of the table. There were traces of questionable powders right next to puddles of spilled mojitos.
You think there was ever life on Mars?
Someone asked.
That's fucked up, right? Like, if there was.
Yeah.
Another agreed.
Like, all the way over there. What is that even like? What does it mean? For us?
Stranger Tom gave me a knowing look.
Sounds like you gentlemen are a curious lot, he smiled. Now, let me present a hypothetical.
He gave them the same speech as we'd gotten. Made it sound fun, kind of like a drinking game. Our biggest, deepest questions, all for a spooky little price. A deal with the strip club devil. One guy just asked for the name of whoever stole his pickup. Another tried to be a smartass, asking for the article number of a replacement drip pan for his fridge. They took turns asking these inane, childish nonsense questions. And I just sat there, sweating. Then there's this one guy, this one drunk asshole that chimes in.
I want to know what God looks like.
He grins.
Wouldn't you guys like to know?
That's a big question.
Nodded Stranger Tom.
One of the biggest.
Yeah, well, I want to know.
The guy repeated.
Don't you guys want to know?
They did. They all did. I tried to chime in. A word here and there, asking them to reconsider or go back to their earlier questions. Hell, I even tried to suggest calling it a night. But it was too late, and Tom had already brought out his lighter. His eyes were brighter now, hungrier. He was thriving. I wanted to do something more, something drastic. If asking what a marriage looks like 20 years into the future rips your entire leg open, what does asking for the face of God cost? I made a plan in my head. I was going to head for the bathroom, maybe pull the fire alarm, or maybe get everyone a round of drinks, stalling for time. But when I saw Stranger Tom's grinning face looking down on me, I knew it was too late.
Don't you want to ask a question too?
He asked. I swallowed my pride, feeling the salt stick to the side of my throat. It burned worse than the whiskey. I nodded. I want to know how to save my wife. I got a few strange looks from around the table, but Tom just smiled.
That's a big ask.
He grinned.
A real big ask.
Can you say help?
Oh, I can.
He nodded.
And I'm sure Sammy will be just fine.
Looking back at it, I was just too nervous to notice, but I never told him her name. He flicked open his lighter and lit the blue flame. It felt like the bulbs in the room started to dim, like the music faded away. The static buzzing in the overhead speakers grew louder.
Then look deep into the flame, gentlemen. Look deep and answer me this.
His eyes flickered. The flame didn't.
Do you submit?
And they did. I closed my eyes and held my breath, waiting for the pain to come. Seconds passed. Then, a whisper.
I love this part.
The man across from me unfurled. That's the best word for it. Unfurled. From his fingertips and up, the very bones of his body started to come undone, like they were escaping his flesh, turning themselves into needles, puncturing him from the inside out. As his skull fractured, twisting his musculature into a parody of a human smile, he started barking nonsensical words. Something from a dead language, long since unheard, all with perfect clarity and pronunciation. As his bones broke apart, smattering like a box of firecrackers, whatever he saw was enough to drive him to an eldritch madness in that last moment. To view the face of a god.
Ew!
He smiled.
Yo!
Blood and tears streamed down his face. His neck broke in a snap, along with his spine and hip, twisting his body into an impossible shape. The others panicked. One guy fell backwards, out of his